We come on the air this evening with several breaking stories on multiple fronts. A short time ago, the White House announced that President Trump has officially started his trade war, signing executive orders imposing tariffs on 3 of our top trading partners, Mexico, Canada, and China. Of course, the U.S. will begin collecting the tariffs on Canadian goods starting this coming Tuesday. We don't yet know when tariffs take effect for Mexico and China. We will be taking a deeper look at what all of this means for you, of course, the consumer, a little later on in this hour. We also have some new developments breaking tonight involving the administration's purge at the FBI. As you may know, Friday night, multiple senior executives at the Bureau, the heads of multiple FBI field offices, and about 2 federal prosecutors who investigated the January 6 rioters were fired. Tonight, we have new details about how that went down, including fierce resistance from the FBI's acting director, Brian Driscoll, who, as of tonight, remains in place. Now, multiple current and former FBI officials tell NBC News that Driscoll refused a Justice Department order that he helped with the firings and turn over the names of every FBI employee who was involved in the January 6 attack, which, of course, was the largest in that bureau's history. Driscoll sent a memo to the workforce last night explaining the directives that he'd received. He did not say whether he would turn over the broader list of January 6-related names, a list he said encompasses thousands of FBI employees, including himself. He wrote, quote, "As we've said, since the moment we agreed to take on these roles, we are going to follow the law, follow FBI policy, and do what's in the best interest of the workforce and the American people, always." In the words of a former FBI official who knows Driscoll well, he pushed back hard, and FBI agents were reportedly heartened by what he did. One agent called Driscoll a stud who told White House proxies making demands to F off. But feelings of fear, discouragement, and low morale remain and are widespread. One of the January 6 prosecutors who was fired Friday tells NBC News they did nothing wrong and didn't have regrets about their work. But, quote, "We have all been looking over our shoulders like, is this the day that we're going to get fired? Because we were doing our jobs." As for the president, he maintains he didn't know anything about Friday's firing. If true, it is alarming that the nation's chief executive is unaware of the biggest sweeping purge at the very department tasked with maintaining law and order. Joining me now is Democratic Congressman Robert Garcia of California. He's a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, it's great to have you with us on this very busy night. I'll start with, the tariffs. I want to get your response to Donald Trump signing these orders to impose these tariffs on the 3 top trading partners of the United States, Canada, Mexico, and China. And as we already have learned, retaliation probably coming down the pipeline, certainly from Canada, in the coming days.
Where I'm sitting right now, I'm across the street from the largest port complex of cargo containers in the United States, the ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles. The economy in this part of the country largely depends on trade. And what I am hearing right now from terminal operators, from trucking companies, from the companies that are actually of course, bringing goods in and out and producing goods is, again, we're back to chaos, confusion, concern. And what this is going to mean, to be very clear, is going to be an increase in prices for the average American family, whether you are trying to buy groceries, whether you're going into the store to build something to a home improvement project, or for a family that's looking to buy their first home. This is going to increase costs of all types of goods across the board.
Explain why, for our viewers who may not know. Why will what President Trump did today impact what you just described?
Because the goods that we're basically trying to export into the United States are essentially going to have a tariff that essentially you can look at as a tax increase. As it relates to Mexico and Canada, you're talking about a 25% tax increase is the way I essentially explain it to folks. And so the people here in the U.S. are the ones that are actually paying the price. And so the folks that are bringing in the goods, that are creating the goods, they're passing this cost down to the average American family. This is incredibly destructive for the economy. And if people think the price of eggs is high now. People think the cost of food and vegetables are high now. Just wait till these tariffs actually fully become into effect in the United States. And so we're seeing in just the last few minutes, an hour, also a revolt from major companies, major manufacturers, and folks involved in the trade industry about what Donald Trump is doing. And so I encourage folks to get loud and to push back forcefully on this issue.
I would never dare ask you to put yourself in Donald Trump's shoes, but what is your understanding of why this administration is imposing these tariffs? How do you not rationalize it, but how do you even try to begin to understand it based on what they are signaling and telling and communicating to the American people directly about why they're doing it?
I mean, this is like lunacy and insanity. I think Donald Trump is imposing these tariffs because maybe he talked about it at rallies. I mean, I don't think anyone has any idea why he's actually even doing this. I mean, look, tariffs, as we know, imposed in this type of swift action, any economist, anyone in the trade industry will all tell you the same thing. This is a horrific idea as it relates to the increase of goods and trying to get inflation under control. And so it's really hard to understand why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing. And he's clearly, in my opinion, going to cause major harm to the average family. And people need to know why their prices are going to go up.
Of course, he's doing that on the trade front. But as I mentioned, the other breaking news story this evening, Congressman, is what is happening domestically with our Department of Justice and our biggest law enforcement agency, the FBI, and the firing of these top executives. Now you have the news that this FBI acting director, Brian Driscoll, refused to assist with forcing out these officials. How are you assessing what has happened? Does it, on one hand, give you hope that we still have individuals like Brian Driscoll who push back, or does the fact that he pushed back mean that he will ultimately be fired and the takeover, if you will, the Justice Department and the FBI will still proceed as Donald Trump and his administration intends?
We should be scared as hell. You have basically Donald Trump forming his authoritarian government, where he is in charge of every lever of government. The idea that he's going to, into one sweeping mandate, fire could be thousands of law enforcement officials that are charged with actually investigating crimes in this country. And by the way, investigating, of course, as we know, serious crimes that were committed on January 6th and attacking our government and other conspiracies. I'm glad, obviously, there are some folks that are going to stand up to Donald Trump. But let's be clear, Kash Patel is right now probably going to cruise through confirmation at the U.S. Senate. And so you have this essentially attack dog of Donald Trump's who's going to go after his political enemies. And I think it's comical. We should laugh at Donald Trump saying he had no idea that this was actually happening. Give me a break. Donald Trump knows exactly what is happening, and he's trying to seize as much control as he can for himself, for Elon Musk, for his billionaire friends, and he's trying to essentially wipe anyone out that wants to stand in his way. We should be very concerned about these actions. And these actions, by the way, along with getting rid of, for example, of all the inspector generals, should be very concerning to us.
I'm going to ask you specifically about the January 6th employees at the FBI. I mean, the fact that, you're talking about, as you mentioned, potentially thousands of employees who were involved in this sprawling investigation. It was at the time described as the largest investigation ever carried out. Almost every single field office in this country had an active case or was participating in that investigation. But to the second point, if these employees are in fact fired, what danger does that pose for our national security in the immediate short term?
A huge danger. Eamon, I think you know this. We had a group of militia, of insurrectionists, try to overthrow the government. Let's not forget what actually happened. They attacked our United States Capitol. They attacked police officers. They tried to change an election that was won fair and square, and they were sent to do so by Donald Trump. Now he wants to essentially silence and punish anyone that was involved in holding these people accountable. And I think the other piece of this that people aren't talking about is what Donald Trump is also doing is he is signaling to all of these folks across the country, very dangerous people, by the way, that now have been pardoned, and their other militia groups, that he is going to protect them. He is building himself a private army and militia of people across the country that are willing to do whatever it is that Donald Trump says. And I think we've got to take this very seriously and know that what he is doing is damaging and harming our national security infrastructure while building his own and supporting those militia, those white nationalist groups that are supporting him across the country. It's really dangerous.
This time, almost 8 years ago, I'm sure you recall, Congressman, when Donald Trump was carrying out executive orders, the Muslim ban and what have you, there were mass protests across this country in disappointment. What is your reaction to the fact that so far in the first 2 weeks of his administrations, with many of these draconian measures that he has taken, these alarming measures that he has taken, certainly on the domestic front, as you mentioned, with the Inspector General as well as now the FBI, you're not seeing this kind of mass mobilization or this anger reflect on the streets?
I mean, I think two things. I think one, I think that Democrats, us as a party, leaders that are out in the community, we have got to be angry. We have got to oppose Donald Trump every time. I have no idea why we're voting for his nominees. We've got to be serious about taking Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the billionaire class on. And when people aren't seeing us in this fight, they're also demoralized to be a part of the fight. We have got to be much more aggressive in taking on Donald Trump and everything he's trying to do. So I think us as a party have to get into the game in a much more aggressive way, and I think that is happening. The second piece of it is, I think what you've seen in the last week is you are starting to see people get fired up. The reason why that freeze got essentially overturned and Donald Trump had to push back the federal funding freeze that happened is because people got pissed. People across the country, from nonprofits, governments, organizations, they stood up and said, hell no, you're not going to take away this funding. You're not going to attack us and our communities. And they flooded the airwaves. They flooded offices, and that actually worked. And so I am starting to feel that people are getting much more engaged, and it's not going to surprise me if we start seeing other large actions and protests start developing in the weeks ahead, and we're going to need it. But us also, as members of Congress and as a party, we've got to match that energy and be angry at this moment.